So that's finally my turn to present you what I had prepared before lunch, but I hope you had a great lunch. When I submitted this title, I'm not sure exactly what I had in mind. Working on the source code of OMERO, there's not going to be a lot of code. I want to give you more feeling of what this is working with the OME team or contributing to this code. But before I get there, I need to tell you about, is it gonna work? It froze. That was a great intro. I cannot redo that. Yes. I want to tell you about past work I've done. And the first thing I need to tell you about is the stack object combiner. Who have heard about the stack object combiner? Yeah, exactly. Please don't ever use that thing. This is something I wrote during my master thesis. So we had two large stacks to be processed for segmentation with Elastic. So the idea, we're going to cut this and we're going to write a program using the Fiji graphical user interface to remerge them. And that was a whole bunch of stuff. This is donut mitochondria that I used to merge as an example. But if I look at the amount of work this took me, that was about 6 months of work, and the reach audience was basically me. That's how much people I could convince this was a useful workflow. Please don't try that. That's no guarantee this is going to work, or that should be the right approach. And I've been looking also into Blender. There's much better way of doing that, right? So not thinking the whole problem through, you get to write a solution that might not necessarily be needed. And that brings me into this picture that probably a lot of us can relate when we talk about moving data from one place to another, transforming it. And so we often think about easier ways of moving forward, but without trying to tackle the real problem that might us, in the end, get us faster where we want to be. And here's another thing I started doing, and this time I took a work that was already something that was already working, a library of someone else. This is again Blender. What you're seeing here is a rendering of neurons in electron microscopy in 3D. But the only thing this plugin was doing, it was able to load the top part, the part that's going up and down in Z. And what I did is going to the code and adding the two parts that go X, Y, ZY and ZX, and adding the few bindings to Blender that now I could create animations. And from this basis of code that was open, then I could do my few contributions and send it back to that person. And that was the first time I contributed to something that was open source. And this was immensely gratifying as a result. And also took very little work. So I think in about a week, I was able to just copy the code and replace the things for these other planes and adding the bindings. And so I could do something much more convincing and useful. And continuing with contributions, this is another tool that I used during my PhD. So this is something we used with these projectors to project visual stimuli. I was in a visual neuroscience laboratory. And using that to project to the retina of mice, and this is a neuron we were recording, so you can see average responses. This led, well, amount of work, very few weeks here for small contribution to that tool. So it was not extraordinary output. What I did, adding a few tools to easier probe the neurons I was looking at. Updates, so using my work, you just had to update to the last QtSpy versions. The reach audience was also rather small here, few neuroscience lab, but there was a bonus outcome. I got to meet a person online working on his project. That was a PI quite prominent in the field as well. And so I got a postdoc offer at the end. I did not win for that postdoc. I did this other thing. That's maybe another story. But contributing to other people's source code, you get to meet people and get into good relations, I would say. And the last example I want to show you, this is the one rig, something I worked on, say, between 2019 and 2021, but the version it's built on top is from the 2017. So that's basically my whole PhD work. Working on this huge library, so taking 4 years of my life. Very important for our lab because we had a lot of customized setup in our labs that we had to go through. detecting different inputs for our experiments, doing eye tracking, uh, merging all different kinds of signals into one time frame that we could perform analysis. And that ended up into publication for our data. But again, this was a rather small audience. We had, well, my labs, that was basically 6, 7 projects that used that, another lab next to us. But for 4 years of work, that's still relatively small output, which finally brings me to contributing to OMERO. And so joining the image facility in Düsseldorf and playing with OMERO, I could already see the benefit of that tool. So what I was doing in my PhD before, synchronizing all this signal, that would have been much easier using data management. And OMERO was already doing a lot of this work I had to do myself. And using OMERO figure, like all of you, I assume you see the great potential in this. But there's still a few things lacking. But I know what I could change. I know where I could go. And so the first thing I did was these dynamic labels that I could add with the brackets in the labels. If I want to display the Z position or another property, and that would then display on my figure and automatically update if I move in the Z plane. So doing something like that. And this very small change then was pushed as an update, I assume, to tens or hundreds of servers that might reach then tens, 100 users every time, which is a much better feeling than in terms of output. And this is the work. Well, it probably took me a month to get acclimated to the code, make my modification, get the modification in. But at the end, the output I got with that was much, much wider. And that continued on with OMERO figure. So here in blue, I'm highlighting contributions from my student, so a student I had, also making her work directly on the source code of these repos. Working on OMERO web, working on the OMERO scripts, also with Jens, collaborating on the key value pair scripts that we renovated, much more PRs and always in different repos. All the little things I see that I could improve, I'm trying to work on that. And basically all this repository, none of them I've created myself. So I tried to get away from generating new things because of all the hurdles or all the problems that come with. And so I showed you the project earlier that I've done from the scratch and the difficulty I had in maintaining them or promoting them, going to conference, talking about them is always very difficult. While just working on those every time, it was very easy just to have my view change and them being pushed to the whole community without the community even knowing that I did something. And that's much easier for me and in terms of reward, I would say. Still, I created a few scripts. So I think we spoke earlier about the OMERO file server import. That could be a topic of this afternoon. I think several of us are discussing that. Also working on things around high content screening. So that's with my colleague Anna Hammerer that we are trying to deal with those things. But I try to limit those to rather scripts that are not a too large package to maintain. Which brings me to my create or contribute kind of comparison. And so also last week going to this conference, we were discussing between programmers, image analysts, and I raised the question, whoever contributed to someone else's project, a project that was not theirs on GitHub, and nobody had ever done that. We discussed, and a thing that came out is that contributing is hard because you need to understand the code. Also, GitHub is difficult, and there's these things that look too impressive for people to start contributing. But I think from my experience, creating something from scratch is going to be much more difficult in terms of all the work you're going to have to do that. When you're going to have to review codes of others, when you are going to have to implement all the quality control, insurance, testing, what looks easy at first to progress is going to get more difficult. And worst thing that can happen to you, people do enjoy a lot your project and it's going to be there for the perpetuity and you're going to have to work on it until the end of your life. Look at him there, the damned. um, Also this, um, I think there's also a kind of thing you're putting in the community, creating a new tool that is asking also the community to adopt it. That's also can be a burden to maintain too many projects. um, and it will take you a lot of time to convince others that your project is better than others. And I'm not saying that it's never the case, but this is a lot of efforts over a very long period of time that you're going to have to go to before there's enough people interested in the thing that makes this thing, what to say, well, attractive for everyone. And in comparison, the way I did of just contributing to this existing repository, this was so easy, so little efforts, and that your code is just becoming part of the main thing right away. This is amazing. And the last argument is also the citation part, that when you create a new tool, you also get visibility by publishing a paper accompanying your software. But I think here again, you will get citation, you will get your paper, but I think you get much more recognition by the community joining forces with others. So getting on board a project, you're going to slowly get into the team just by having your name being on the GitHub or being on the forum like I'm doing now. If you have a problem with my OMERO figure change, I'm the one who can answer because I also have been uh, I start to know the code as well. So you're slowly getting in that team, and other people recognize that even if your work is not the main piece of it, you're still a contributor. And I think in the open source community, that's something uh, people really recognize. So if you're a programmer, you're probably going to be more visibility contributing to that, to existing bigger projects. Now I'm talking to an audience that's not just made of programmers, but there's probably different ways to get involved in our community. If you're not writing code at all, but you're using these tools, you need to also promote acknowledging, citing the tools you're using. This is important for those who make the code to say that this piece of software is important that will help them get fundings. But there's also work you can do on testing the tools, reporting the issues, using the forum you may just see for our community. This is probably the most efficient way. Of course, if you can contribute things yourself like documentations or walkthroughs, workflows, all these are pieces that are also important for everything we're doing. And you probably already know that OMERO has a lot of different pieces in the documentation, and there's some parts that could be improved. But who's going to be doing this? This could be anyone, I think, in this room that's using OMERO that can find, that could contribute to those kind of things. And if you're a project leader and you have students, I would also encourage you to make those students work on existing projects, really getting into this. I'm going to start collaborating with something that exists, with a team of people that exist. It will be very good for the student to have people telling him or review his code or her code. Because when you're working on your own and nobody's telling you if it's good or bad in a way, you really can go in any direction. So joining a team like that with the open source, I think is a very formative way, very good way of learning. And it's also not just about OMERO. There's much more open source projects that we are using. Well, we could think about Fiji. I don't know if Fiji is easier to contribute to. Could even think about Wikipedia if there's things you think you could contribute. This is all part of the open community overall. So you could think of all the different projects. Also donating money is a way. Yes, so I hope I was able to convey some of these feelings of working with the code source of OMERO. This is having your code, so pull request is a bit of a lingo of GitHub, but that means having your code changes integrated into the main branch of the code, so getting into the next version. It does carry the same feeling as being published. So having your paper accepted, you receive the email. When I receive an email from GitHub that say my code was merged, it's also saying that, okay, a piece of my work is now public and can be used by others. And hopefully we are not alone doing that. So this is a pull request from Remy. That's another.
Which guy?
Yeah, I don't know. Find the commonalities. So he's working in EPFL, but I think he's French, right? Okay, we have to fight. But I remember, well, I told him once, you can actually work on a OMERO figure. And he went right away and started changing a lot of things. He made so many contributions now that I also had to share this cartoon. That seeing someone else also working next to you on the same kind of topic, solving problems for you is also a really nice thing. So yeah, really thanks, Remy, for doing all this work. And in the next release of OMERO figure, I think you're going to see a lot of changes. So some that you might really appreciate. And with that, I'm finished. Hopefully not too fast. And thank you for your attention.